Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, coming at you live to talk about Kantai Collection, the movie, which finally, as of the time of this recording, was recently released, fully subbed, and quite frankly, I found it to be spectacular. I had a blast and a half watching this movie. I loved every dripping minute of it. And for those who may still be around from the days when I was covering episodically the anime series, you might be familiar with the fact that I had never played the game. I still to this day have not played the game. But I did have certain qualms and issues with the anime series proper. And even in spite of that, I was still really endeared to it. And most of that was down to the characters. The characters were all fairly distinct and very memorable, very endearing to me. Yudachi being my favorite character in the anime series, and that still stands to this day. She's still the like 10th spot on my anime list, favorite characters of all time thing. I loved hearing that in the movie. She's saying poi 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 all over the place again. I love that. I know some people got annoyed by that. Although I thought it was interesting in the movie, they kind of flip it on its ear where they've sort of turned it, rather than spelling out the word poi, P-O-I, in the subtitles as they did in the anime proper, they've substituted it with the word like. So she's kind of talking more like a valley girl, that kind of thing. And I don't know if that was the original intention of her saying poi in the game and such like that. But I had a lot of fun with the anime in spite of its flaws. It was by no means perfect. And so I was really, really chomping at the bit to see this film when finally it would be released and subbed and all that stuff. And it did not disappoint. For anyone who may have watched the anime and found it to be imperfect by any stretch of the imagination, I have no sort of criticisms against the movie. I think the movie eschewed any problems the anime itself had, the anime series, and just made it a fluid, very compelling, very engaging film, setting up this world that much further, building upon the foundations that were set up in the anime series, especially revolving around what exactly the Abyssal Fleet was, what their origins were. They play very much heavily on that in this film, and I'm not going to go too in depth, no pun intended, to spoil the movie for you in case you haven't seen it. I will be talking about a couple of things that are mildly spoilery, but I'm not going to tell you how it ends or anything like that, and I have to highly recommend at this point, if you haven't already seen it and you're watching this video to gauge whether or not you should, stop what you're doing, seek it out, watch it. I think you will not be disappointed, even if you had mild interest in the anime and or the game and everything like that. All of my favorite characters from the anime play a part in this film, from Nagato to Yamato to Kongo and Akagi, Kaga, Fubuki, Yudachi, Mutsuki, the main trio, which I have action figures, statues of back here. And that's the one thing. After the anime series, I was so endeared to the characters, I became a collector of the figures and statues. Now, I only really pick and choose ones that I, really like, and I've done some videos. I think I've done a video for each and every one that I've ever gotten. Some of the earlier videos were more showcase videos with music, and I wasn't really talking, I was just focused on the figures, unboxing them, showing what you got and everything like that. And then some of the more recent videos, I've just sort of been on camera unboxing them and showing them and stuff, and sharing my opinions on them. But that's what KanColle did to me, I even watched the series Brave Witches, which, it's a completely different thing, but it kind of filled that void that I had, that longing I had had for something Kantai Collection like when it came out, and which was itself a spin-off from Strike Witches, which I haven't actually watched yet. But this movie, man, it starts off, and this is going to be minorly spoilery here, it starts off in a way, it kind of gives you a wrongful impression, at least in sort of the prologue, where you see, for all intents and purposes, Fubuki having been sunk. And I had been under, the sort of specious impression at that point, oh crap, is this whole movie going to be she was sunk and she comes back as an abyssal, and this is what confirms that speculation, that backstory that I and many viewers of the anime had been discussing back and forth in all of my episodic anime reviews, and wondering if they would ever let that other leg drop and answer that question. Well, no, it wasn't quite the case that it was Fubuki, but it was definitely, that was the overall, overarching structure of the story was based on answering that particular enigma, that riddle, that mystery about the origins of the Abyssal Fleet, the enemy fleet, And that precursor where you see Fubuki having been sunk, this is something that plays very heavily into the end game of the film, and that's all I will say on that topic. But the first sort of thing that threw me for a loop, because I went into this movie knowing nothing about it at all whatsoever. I hadn't read anything, any reviews, any discussions. I looked at any previews apart from like the first one, going back like a year or more now. That they had released for the film. I knew nothing, and the first thing that gobsmacked me to all hell was the return of Kisaragi. And I'm just like, the whole time, I'm just like, Mutsuki is going ape guano over this when she is, for all intents and purposes, found. And her plight, her story relates heavily to that mystery, that overhanging mystery. What are the Abyssals? Are they, in fact, as was the high point speculation all throughout the course of the anime series proper, were the Abyssals, in fact, fleet girls who had gone down, who had sunk, and were transmogrified, reborn, mutated into this enemy fleet in various capacities? And so her return might have, kind of sort of hinted at where the story was going to go with that, and I'll leave it at that as well. Again, I don't want to spoil anything. There's also, again, another minorly spoilery aspect. I was shocked, quite frankly, and surprised to find that Kaga relates heavily to that concept. And you might say that we find through the course of the film, Kaga and Kisaragi are kind of two halves of the same coin, insofar as how that relates to that enigma of fleet girls potentially becoming Abyssals, enemy, fleet ships and everything like that. And so that gobsmacked me. The battle sequences all throughout the film were spectacular when they had them, when they focused upon them, and I felt very happy that, they didn't sort of make the movie non-stop action. There was, action to set you up at the beginning of the film, then there was character drama and refamiliarizing yourself with all of the characters you loved from, the anime series proper. I'm sure there were a couple of characters that they didn't even include in the anime that finally got showcased in this film. And, a lot of which I'm just not familiar with. I'll have to learn them. I've seen a couple of them before, whether it be looking at action figures or looking at game art and character designs and whatever like that. People who are more, that much more aficionados on Kantai Collection, the game and the anime and all of those, surrounding characters, whatever like that, would probably be able to, tell me which characters are new to the anime format within this film. But, I just thought, like Yudachi, one of the first Kantai Collection figures, I think the first one I ever bought was a Shimakaze, but one of the first ones I sought out heavily eagerly to buy was Yudachi in her Kai-Ni format. Now, I don't have that one, whereas I have back here Fubuki, Yudachi, and Mutsuki in their regular anime forms, pre-Kai-Ni in the case of Yudachi. My Yudachi Kai-Ni is actually put away temporarily in a box for safekeeping until I have somewhere to display it. But the Kai-Ni version of her was the first Yudachi anything I was able to get my hands on. I was heavily excited to finally land that when I did. And it was one of my first, Kantai Collection figure videos. I'm not actually sure if I had gotten Akagi and Kaga before I got her or not. They're, whatever order they are in my action figure collectibles playlist is the order I got them in. But I digress, But it was all kinds of awesome to see Yudachi in her Kai-Ni format unloading, holy hell, on the Abyssals in this film. They really showcased the hell out of her, and I was so happy, utmost excited about that. Seeing Yamato getting into the action was awesome. Seeing Nagato sort of going from being, the woman issuing the orders and everything like that, she actually got involved a little bit. You didn't really see her in too much heated action, but it definitely toward the latter half of the film, it was getting really palpable with the focused idea of this particular region that I think they called like Iron Bottom Sound or something like that. I haven't, memorized it. But this focused area is in the midst of an abyssal sort of stronghold that they end up, for all intents and purposes, defeating. But as a consequence of this, the ocean waters have become blood red. And whenever they skirt along this, water that is changing color, all of their weaponry and everything like that, all of their mechanics is starting to malfunction and disintegrate and break down mysteriously. And there is a voice emanating from this center area, Iron Bottom Sound or whatever it's called, that very much again answers to that enigma, that overhanging question of what are the origins of the abyssals? How does that relate to the Fleet Girls? And there's even the question called into the fray about Fubuki's own lacking of her background. There are certain memories she doesn't have encapsulated in her mind as to where she was formerly stationed before she came to be here and all this kind of stuff. And it's quite intriguing. Again, it's kind of playing into that return of Kisaragi, that idea that Kaga may have something to do with it. Some have had experiences that are kind of similar to Kisaragi's, and then even Fubuki. And Fubuki very much, whereas she's not the focused sort of main focused upon character at the start of the film, by the end she is. And for being a fan of the anime series where she was very much in the center frame at all times, I was again satisfied by that. I was happy that they sort of brought it back to her. I think some people might be perturbed by that, like, oh, why put the limelight on her? Why put the focus on her? But it was really captivating how the story played out. And I just can't get into it any further. Except perhaps for any of my fellow anime fans and Kantai Collection fans who may have ever watched any Star Trek. The original series with Kirk, Spock, Dr. McCoy, Uhura, and everything like that from the 60s. There was an episode called The Enemy Within. The idea of the episode was the crew of the Enterprise are down on a planet and they have to beam back up because like a storm front, very wintry weather or something like that is coming in. But there are materials on the ground that are messing with the Enterprise's transporters. So like somebody beams up and some of this dust gets in the works and everything. And it messes up the transporter so that when Kirk beams up, first you see him beam up and he seems to be okay for all intents and purposes, but he's like cradling his head. He feels ill. He's kind of disorientated and everything like that. And Scotty has to help him out of the transporter room. Soon thereafter, the transporter, with the room empty, energizes again, and a duplicate of Kirk appears on the transporter pad. And thus we have a dichotomy where we have the former Kirk that appeared being very passive and not very strong of heart and will and mind, and he still has intellect, but he's not decisive anymore. He doesn't have that oomph, that joie de vivre, that kind of thing. Whereas this alternate version that shows up after the fact is all the rage and the animosity and that impetuous going back to the dawn of mankind, that instinctive nature, but it's all the worst aspects of the mind, the mentality. Now, with that description, I've basically kind of sort of, in a way, described what is the crux of the end of this film as it relates to Fubuki. And I'll leave it there. I won't say any more about it. I highly recommend you check out the film if you haven't already. If you have, try to avoid posting spoilers in the comments below, but I'd love to hear your own thoughts on it. Did you find it as satisfying as I did and love it as much as I did? Were excited as much as I was by it? Or could you have taken it or left it, that kind of thing? Anything goes in the comments below, whether you loved it or hated it. Our POVs can certainly disagree as long as we get a great conversation out of it. But for me, personally, for my money, this movie was gangbusters. As a fan of the anime, which was by no means perfect, this movie, for all intents and purposes, was perfection. I loved it that much, and I can't wait to watch it again at some point when I get all caught up with my weekly anime and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, I hesitate to say anything more about the film without just being a no holds barred, spoilery discussion, in-depth discussion. But it was great. I loved it. It was so worth the wait, put it that way. And so yeah, that's really all I've got to say on it. I am a thorough Kantai Collection fan, never having played the game at all. Simply and utterly because of the anime and the characters. I love the characters. I'm still collecting figures when I can afford them. I've got 3 in my radar right now that I haven't actually purchased, but I might by the end of this month if the funds can be allowed for it. Because I still love these characters. And these particular 3 figures are actually characters that are heavily involved in this film. So I won't say who they are, but again, let me know what you thought of this film if you've already seen it. If you're going to be checking it out, I'd love to hear back from you once you have, what you thought of it. If this video, recommendation, if you will, review, discussion, thoughts video, pointed you in that direction, let me know that as well. And so yeah, I hope you enjoy the film if you do check it out. If you haven't seen it already, I certainly did, and I can't wait to check it out again. And that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.